It seemed that the mine owners, desperate to make sure there were no more strikes or attacks, had persuaded the new magistrate to order the body gibbeted. A metal cage was constructed and paid for by the mine owners. Poor Jobling was thrown onto the back of a four-wheeled wagon, and its 4 black horses drove it from Durham up to Jarrow Slack, near where Fairless had been attacked. The pit owners made sure it was a procession to allow everybody to see what could happen to anybody that spoke up against those with the money. The procession travelled through Chesterley Street, Picktree, Portobello, Birtley, Blackfell, Whitemare Pool, Felling, and then back to Turnpike Road onto Jarrow Slack. The lifeless, stinking corpse was put into the gibbet, and it was erected by soldiers from the 8th Hussars and was guarded by infantrymen from the 15th Foot Regiment, ordered down from Newcastle to keep the peace. The gibbet was erected like it was a statue to the war dead. There were dignitaries there, the mayor, and even representatives from the Crown and Judiciary. There was a crowd estimated at around 1,500, as his poor, broken body was put into a cage 26 inches wide. His head held in place by a metal collar with supports holding his arms and legs in place. His face was covered with a grave cloth, yet the biggest shock of the day was when some wag in the crowd shouted, "Come on, Joblin, stop fooling about. It's time for your shift." At that very second, a strong wind blew the cloth from his face, and Jobling's eyes stared out directly at the crowd. Women fainted, and the man who shouted it almost passed out. The gibbet was within Jarrow Slack, about 100 or so yards from the high water mark, so the tide couldn't damage it. It was anchored in a stone weighing around 2 tons. And it was an odd scene. This man dressed in a blue jacket, his slate grey trousers and work boots, and once he'd been there a while, gravity had eerily pulled his head back, as if he was staring up to the heavens. The army kept vigil, knowing that his fellow pitmen would have removed him first chance they got. And once the soldiers left, the police kept watch for close on a month. Then one day, the local magistrate drove past the gibbet to find all of the metals hammered open. Jobling had gone. No one has ever really discovered who took him. There were various claims made from relatives stating that they had taken the body, none verified. Yet the one most often told was about a gang of pitmen led by Robert Turner, who had spent an entire night breaking the rotten corpse from the gibbet. He claimed to be Jobling's cousin, yet this wasn't true, but he probably used that as a reason to get other men to help him. And as the lifeless body fell out of the cage, it splashed into deep, brown, silt-sodden water, weighed down by the iron shroud attached to the body. And that weight took it down into the mud. It took them another hour to find it and drag it feet first out of there. They claimed that they buried the body at the corner of Jarrow Quay, as it was too heavy to move any further. However, they've dug for it there and not found it. However, in the late 1890s, Robert Thompson was close to death when he said that he was one of the men who had dragged the body from the river further along the riverbank and buried it where Lion Street or Wagonway Road now stand, near Hebburn. The practice of gibbeting was made illegal soon afterwards. The original gibbet stayed in place for 60 years until it was handed over to the Newcastle upon Tyne Antiquarian Society. They even had a Jobling display for a while at the Bede Gallery. And every time earthworks are dug anywhere in the vicinity, historians wonder if the iron shroud of Jobling will show itself. They were certain it would happen during the laying down of the railway tracks. Yet it never happened. There is still time. The houses of Lion Street and Wagonway Road have suffered hauntings for 170 years. And yet it's somewhere else in the area that suffered far, far worse. It seems in death, Jobling was as well behaved as he was in life. It's his mother who seems still to be trouble to the people of Harton. She'd been an inmate of the workhouse at Harton. Young William had looked after her all of his working life, but once he was gone, she had no choice but to beg for help. She was a frail yet vindictive and twisty old woman who was forced to work hard because of the injustice done to her son. And if your name is Jobling and you live on Tyneside, it's almost certain you will be related to this stretch of the Joblin family. After years of making herself a problem to all who knew her, she died in the workhouse, aged 96. She left 3 daughters, 23 grandchildren, and 30 great-grandchildren. The old woman's body was buried in loose dirt on Grosvenor Road in Harton, and ever since, she's proven herself to be more trouble in death than she ever was in life. In 1933, a pit manager, Edward Conway, lived on that road in Harton, and he was driven out of his home by what he described as a shrieking demon from hell. This old woman apparently had appeared out of nowhere and launched herself at him, knocking him down and clawing his face and chest. He needed 28 stitches to close the wound. The police searched for the attacker despite Conway saying, "If they want to waste their time chasing a ghost, let them, but my family cannot stay here." He moved in and out of that house within 9 days. This is absolute proof that he had no doubts whatsoever. Word began to circulate about the Jobling woman, still angry that her son was wrongfully executed. And the next 10 years, over 70 people living on Grosvenor Road saw, experienced or suffered not just ghostly activity, but poltergeist assaults. Children were tripped, scraped, scratched and clawed. And on another occasion, a pit foreman in 1948 suffered a cot death there. And on walking into his child's bedroom, saw an old woman standing over the crib housing his dead baby. He told the coroner, who chose to leave that out of his report, stating that the father was obviously lost in his grief. During the 1950s and 60s, things seemed to calm down. Yet in the early